My name is Ben. I am the host of the BTC sessions on YouTube. And thanks. Thanks, Mom. And this panel is called How Not to Lose All of Your Bitcoin. We're just going to go down the line really quick, introduce ourselves, and we'll get right into it. So,
I'm Nick, CEO of Casa, an easy and safe way to hold your own keys.
Yeah, I'm Ben Kaufman. I'm working on Spectre Wallet, Multisig with your own node.
I'm Kevin Loaec. I'm the CEO at Revolt. We are working on a Bitcoin Vault architecture.
I'm Nahum, Chief Architect at Blockstream.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to kind of take this in a few different approaches. I'm just going to get this out of the way right away before we get into some of the meat of the other stuff. I think this needs to be said. One of the number one ways to not lose all your Bitcoin is to not trade shitcoins. I'll leave it there, but I feel like some people might need to hear that. But with that, let's kind of dive in. I wanted to start from the basics of where a newcomer might come in, and their first experience is they're buying Bitcoin somewhere, and that's going to be probably sitting with a custodian. So what I want to attack with the panel here is custody ever okay, even for a limited amount of time, or do we start pushing self-custody right away? And maybe how you guys have talked to friends and family about this, and your thoughts. So let's start here.
Yeah, so the way that I look at this is people are always going to have a range between full custody and self-custody. And the point when you should start really seriously thinking about self-custody is when the amount of Bitcoin that you own would be an amount that you're afraid to lose. So when you start to worry about, this is a significant investment for me, that's when it's time to start thinking about security and making moves off of something like an exchange where you may be holding your Bitcoin to start with.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's just all about not complicating things too much. So the thing is that it's obviously much better, at least in my opinion, to self-custody, but it's not worth it if you feel like you don't know what you're doing. So that's like what people are usually falling for, because they are rushing to self-custody and doing stuff they don't really understand, and then they fuck it up. So the best tip I can give is just not to rush it. Obviously it's better for everyone, in my opinion, to self-custody, but just go on BTC sessions, see a couple of videos, and take the time to learn before you actually do this.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think there is no simple answer to that. It really depends also on your threat model. Mm-hmm. So if you want to keep the sovereignty thing in Bitcoin and you want to be, your own master and control everything, sure, you should do your self-custody, and that's why I encourage anyone to do. But I mean, if you're absolutely non-technical, you have no idea what you're doing, you have a lot of money and you need to keep your Bitcoin somehow, somewhere, you are not scared of maybe someone seizing your fund or things like that. There is still this option of using someone else that know what they're doing.
Awesome.
Well, yeah, so maybe if you're not doing your own self-custody, maybe you're not ready for Bitcoin. But at the same time, I think that, maybe there's some use cases where you don't need to do your own self-custody, like if you use Bitcoin just as a rail, like if you're just using it to pay your supplier in another country, and you just send fiat to an exchange, get the coins and send them directly to your supplier. Well, where are you going to hold them for 5 minutes while you're sending them to your supplier? Maybe not. So maybe you just don't have your own custody. But then you're not holding Bitcoin at that point, right? You're just using it as a rail. So maybe there are some use cases, but generally I would say that if you can do self-custody, maybe you're not ready yet. Maybe you should spend a little bit more time researching things.
Yeah. Okay. So in general, I like what was said here. For me personally, I think if you're getting into a situation where you have analysis paralysis, where you're thinking that you need to understand a lot right off the bat, then maybe it's okay to be in custody for a short period of time if it's preventing you from getting off zero. But get off zero and start learning as quickly as you can. Take the steps. And so I guess some of the first steps that you would be taking would be initially trying out a hot wallet, getting something on your phone and backing up your seed phrase. So there's two aspects to that, understanding how a hot wallet works and properly backing it up. A lot of people will put that on paper, but you know, you got guys like the Bill Fodl guys inside. They've lots of options to put it in steel. So what are some of the things you recommend initially as people are diving into wallets, some of the things they need to understand? And I'm talking specifically hot wallets, so those people watching that don't understand what that means, it means the credentials or the keys to your money reside on a device that is directly connected to the internet. So there's a trade-off there. It's a little less secure than some other options that we'll talk about in a moment. But what do you tell people when they're starting with a hot wallet, how to get started?
Yeah, so at Casa, we take a very different approach actually from most of the hot wallets out there. So with our hot wallet product, we don't make you back up your seed phrase. You still hold the keys, but what we do is we encrypt that key on your phone, and then we back it up to the iCloud or Google Drive for you. And so that means if you lose your phone, you can still recover that key, but if somebody gets access to your iCloud and they aren't you, and they don't have your Casa account as well, then they're not going to get your key. And so for the amount that you're actually storing on a hot wallet, we say this is great security, and we don't make you write down that seed phrase right when you open the app for the first time, which we think is very confusing and can be intimidating for people. And so for people who want to do that seed phrase backup, that option's always there, and I think that people should be able to have that. They're your own keys, but we tried to make it much simpler where it feels like using Coinbase, but you're still the one in control. And so that's just a little different angle that we take on it.
Okay, cool. Ben,
Yeah.
what do you think?
So the first thing, I guess, is just to make sure that people take it seriously. So they need to understand that they have a lot of responsibility now that they are holding their own money. So I heard a lot of stories about people who wrote their seed back up on some napkin or something and just threw it and lost it, and that's how they lost their money. So if you just take it seriously, you're already, and make sure you back it up properly, make sure to do test transactions and stuff, then you're already quite safe, even though it's a hot wallet. So yeah, just the thing is just to take it seriously.
Awesome. Well.
Yeah, this is a great answer, I think. And yeah, I mean, there are processes where you can even go the entire step to make sure that your key generation is secure and stuff. There are a few different protocols online that you can check. It might take more time, a few hours rolling dice and making sure that there is no single point of failure in your key generation. But it's still all down to key management. So your secret is your private key or your seed. But you need a backup of that, so different form of backups, and then it's, again, what's your single point of failure? So you can have a super secure hardware wallet, but you'll leave your seed phrase on the table at home, and then at some point your funds are gone, right? But in the hot wallet setup, I mean, I wouldn't recommend people to start with a hot wallet, like something on their phone, just because the price going up, it's really hard to keep a track, and I only have $20. But 5 years later, that's $2,000, and maybe that's not, something I'm okay to lose. And so people who don't go through this setup at the very beginning, going through the right steps, are usually just pushing it further and further, and they're I'm gonna do it later, until they lose their funds, and then bad stories.
Awesome.
And that's how you end up with some of the stories of people losing $100 million of Bitcoin, because when they originally set up their security, it was worth $500 or something. And so people should be thinking about, what do I think the value of this Bitcoin will be one day, and taking their security from that angle for sure.
Right. Yeah.
Now, Blockstream has a pretty solid, I use Green quite often, and you guys probably have a lot of support to deal with, people talking and asking about your wallets. What are some of the things, some of the issues that people run into when they're first dealing with a hot wallet that you guys find?
Well, so I was going to also say, to add what the other guy said, that whatever solution you choose, I think most of the time it gets sticky. So you'll find yourself using the same solution in 5 or 6 years. As everyone said, it's likely that Bitcoin will appreciate in this time. So your security needs to be aligned with that. And for a number of reasons, when I say sticky, I mean it. Like it's relatively hard to move from one solution to another. Not because it's hard to make a transaction and move from wallet A to B, but because, when you do that, there's always fees involved, but also there's a security involved. Like you probably have to take your cold storage from somewhere. You have to do some action that it's usually something that gives many people anxiety. And so I think wallets become very sticky. People tend to use one wallet and then don't tend to move very often to another wallet. And so it's very important that you choose wisely your first solution, even if you're starting off with a small amount, because as we said, things change. So the other question was, what are the common pitfalls that people have? Yeah, so I don't really have that much to add from what Ben said. People lose their money. I think it's very important, or their keys, it's very important to back them up, but also to force the user to re-enter them, to make sure that they still have them. I think it's far easier for people to lose their coins because they lose their backups and things like that rather than getting hacked. But I think in the future this might change a little bit, especially with a supply chain, like library changes upstream that could potentially impact a number of wallets. I think this happened in the past with some JavaScript libraries, where some developers or some attackers compromise some library upstream, and then any software downstream that uses this library would then get compromised. So,
yeah, awesome. So, after somebody dives into controlling their own keys, understanding how to use a wallet, how to back it up, often the next step they'll take is getting a hardware wallet or a cold wallet. And again, I'm kind of directing this to some of the noobs out there that are still wrapping their heads around it, but effectively the keys or the credentials to your money are now residing on a device which is offline, which is not directly connected to the internet. And so we could sit here all day and pick apart what options are best or what our favorites are, but I more just want to focus on what should people think about in terms of the qualities of a particular wallet when trying to figure out where to go, how to, what devices to use. So, usability, like ease of use, all that kind of stuff. And also, I know we're going to have some pushback here, just general thoughts on hardware wallets as security in general. So I'm going to start here and we'll just go down. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that with any hardware device, there is, especially if somebody has access to it, there's a chance that there's a vulnerability with it. And so you have to think this is not a perfect solution by any means, but it's still going to be a lot better than many of the other options out there. And for large amounts of Bitcoin, you want to make sure that you're not keeping it in a hot wallet. A cold wallet is really useful for that. The biggest thing that I think is a risk that people have to think about when they're using a cold wallet is they look like little USB sticks. So it's really easy to put it somewhere and then not touch it for 3 years or 5 years because you're kind of scared about moving Bitcoin off of it or using it. You don't really understand what's going on. And so making sure that you're actually regularly checking up on it to make sure that your Bitcoin is healthy, you know how to use it, everything like that is really important, because pretending that everything is okay without checking it is kind of like the Schrodinger's cat situation. It's like Schrodinger's Bitcoin. As long as I don't try to access it, it's probably still there, and I don't know. So you have to be very familiar with that kind of setup, but if you do it right, it can be much more secure than a hot wallet.
Yeah, I think hardware wallets are very useful for the most users, basically. So it helps people just easily do some best practices, so keeping your keys offline, which is already a great improvement over a hot wallet. Again, it's not perfect, it's never perfect, especially against when an attacker have like physical access or something. So that can always be a problem. But then again, it's already much better than a hot wallet or leaving it on an exchange. So in general, I think hard wallets are really useful. Yeah. Besides that, yeah. Sorry. So I think you could just between the hardware wallets, it doesn't really matter too much. I mean, I have my favorites, but it doesn't matter too much. There are some considerations, but they are mostly the same. I would just recommend pick something that you feel comfortable with. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, hardware wallets, definitely get one of those. It doesn't prevent people from stealing your keys, but at least it protects you a lot from online attacks. So if your laptop is compromised or something, your key might, be much more secure on a hardware wallet. Then again, never buy a hardware wallet from Amazon. Never buy a hardware wallet. Like you should just buy them from like the manufacturer directly. There is a lot of different attacks around it. If somebody modify it before you receive it, well, your funds might go away. So be really careful and don't assume that your hardware wallet is secure as a thing. Don't leave it, around in your house without you knowing where it is or who can touch it, because there are also attacks like that. Yeah, and I'm just going to add something. I'm going to shield my stuff a little bit. Just saying that right now we're talking about key management because that's pretty much the only way to defend your Bitcoin from being stolen. It's like keep your private key secure, basically, through different schemes, hot wallet, cold wallet, multisig, hardware wallets. But what I'm working on at Revolt, or what we're working on, is a protocol on top of Bitcoin that lets you also define spending policies. So you basically cannot spend the money outside of this restriction. So you can define in advance like whitelist of addresses, and if someone tried to spend the money elsewhere, then the funds are going back in like a cold storage kind of stuff. So this is going to be very important for Bitcoin. Again, free open source software, it's going to become a standard. Hopefully, very soon. In 3 months, we can use that on Bitcoin, and hopefully most of the providers like Casa and the others will also let you set up your policies, and you will sleep better at night.
That's interesting. So I just have a question here. Could you set a policy, and this isn't great privacy-wise, but could you set a policy that Bitcoin can only be spent to maybe an address that resides on a hardware wallet first, and everything else is just totally offline, and then from there you've got that kind of like extra assurance of like if somebody got access to your keys, that you set up initially, it could only go to that wallet before you moved it to where you actually want it to go?
Yeah, this is completely agnostic. You can define anything you want. You could even use like a third party as like, you use this as a way, like if somebody tried to spend outside of policy, it moves in a larger multisig that includes maybe a notary or insurance company, and they have to be present to let you move your funds again. So there are a lot of things you can do. And you can have like very stupid policies, like you cannot spend your Bitcoin if Bitcoin is worth under 50K, so you cannot sell your Bitcoin if it's too low, I mean, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, I went on a tangent there a little bit, but I'll pass it down the line.
So software or hardware wallets, you really want to avoid things that are overly, majority of people should avoid things that are overly custom or overly complex. You want something that uses a standard, or at the very minimum that it's easy to import in another wallet should this wallet go haywire. You want something that it's still going to work in 10 years, in 5 years, if you decide to not touch your wallet for a while. And so, yeah, some players, institutional players, and some big Bitcoiners, fine, they can use some complex wallets or very custom wallets, and they probably have a dev team, or they can pay someone to handle recovery if they need to. But ultimately, I think people should focus on keep it simple, because one of the easy ways to lose coins is messing about and trying things that are too new or too experimental. And maybe it's a nice wallet and everything, but in 2 years the software is unmaintained, and good luck recovering the coins.
Yeah, cool. Okay, now I'm glad you touched on complexity because user error can be a big issue, as we've kind of alluded to the whole time. I just wanted to, in our last kind of 5 or 6 minutes here, touch on something a little bit more complex that more people are starting to dive into. I'd say it's not fully fleshed out and easily usable for most people. I've done some tutorials around it, but I wanted to touch on multisig because it's something where not everybody understands that the backup process of multisig differs from the backup process of a regular hardware wallet, because you don't just need the backups of the hardware wallets, and if you lose some of the keys and you also lose like the general backup of the actual multisig, then people may not realize that they actually need all of the devices to recreate that. So just to kind of outline this, effectively with a multisig, not only do you have the backups of your devices, you also have the backup of kind of like the map to your money. And you create that map with bits of information from each individual device. So if you lose the map and you only have 2 of the 3 keys, you can't recreate that map. You can't find your coins. And in general, just multisig, I guess I should simplify for people that are super new. It basically means you're creating a vault to your money that has multiple keys or multiple credentials, and you need at least a certain number of the total number of keys. So you could have 3 keys and require at least 2 of them to unlock your money. So I just wanted to go quickly down the panel with the time in mind. Quick thoughts on multisig, super relevant for yourself, and what can we do to make it easier?
So Casa's whole business is basically built around making multisig easier for people. And some of the problems that you mentioned in your intro there are just not problems when you're using Casa. Because that map, while it tells you what your keys are doing, it doesn't actually allow you to spend from those keys. So Casa just keeps that map for you. And so let's say that whole problem of having to back up more information, you just don't have to deal with, but you are still holding your own keys. And so that's why really what we believe is that multisig can be extremely simple if you're using the right software to do it. And there's huge upside to doing that, because instead of just having that one key where you lose that key, you lose all your money, you've got multiple keys, and if you lose one, you still have access to your Bitcoin. So using the right software is key, but I think that multisig will be really the future of Bitcoin security.
Yeah. And so it's dependent on the user, right? You go to somebody like Casa for multisig in the context of, I don't want to screw up, and I want somebody to have my back if I do screw up in part. Now, Ben, you're working on something that enables somebody to basically take control of that entirely themselves. And the reason somebody might lean one way or the other is there are privacy trade-offs, of course, in having a multisig in concert with a company, right? Whereas what you're working on, maybe you can talk a little bit about it and just what you're doing with multisig and how it differs.
Yeah. So at Spectre, we let the user do his own multisig, so it's all like do it yourself with your own node, do it however you want. But yeah, it's harder for the user, so it's like a bit more advanced. I think for large amounts, for users who are with large amounts, it makes a ton of sense. Just need to make sure that you understand what you're doing. So first of all, understand how the backup works. It's not complicated if you take take an hour to just watch a video or read about it. So it's really stuff that you don't really need to do much to understand it, but you do need to take the few hours to make sure you understand everything. Besides the backup, so you also need to make sure you have the right cosigners. So some devices are not really, like Ledger, for example, is a device which is not secure for multisig currently. So you need to make sure to know, you should know these pitfalls. But yeah, if you just do your research and take a few hours to read about it, then most users can do it fairly well, and the security is much, much better than a single wallet.
Cool. You got 30 seconds each. We're running on the clock.
Right.
Go.
Yeah, no problem. So multi-signature in a single party environment, meaning like if you're just an individual and you want to have multi-signature, what it protects you against is basically just losing one of your private keys, and the funds are not going to be stolen that way. That's pretty much it. So to defend against that, you need to keep, well, you should keep your different hardware wallets in different locations. You should not have both of them on you, because otherwise, like, that kind of defeats the purpose. Same for your backups. If you have multiple hardware wallets in a multi-sig setup, don't put all your seed in the same place, because if someone gets access to that, like using multi-sig is just useless for you. And also, like, multi-sig is directly impacting your user experience. Like, the more signature, the more secure, but also like the less efficient in terms of like fees, in terms of stuff.
I'm going to give him a 10-second hot take. Go.
Well, so one thing that is missing from hardware wallets at the moment is committing to that map. Look, like having the hardware wallets know about everyone else's public keys, and we really need a standard for that.
Cool. All right. I'm sorry we have to cut it. Thank you guys very much, and have a great rest of the day.